I call to order the February meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank everybody for being here this afternoon. Due to the pandemic, all committee members are participating virtually. For virtual meetings, committee members will be muted until asked to be heard. When there's a vote, it will be necessary to take a roll call vote. The committee member will be recognized, raise their hand, and state their vote. So anyway, as hopefully we'll be back in person soon, but for now we're still meeting virtually. I would also like to make a quick comment. Our city manager, Mr. Garrett's under the weather, but Lee, I hope you're not watching, but if you are, do what the doctor says, get well and get on back here. Anyway, we will start as usual with the consent agenda. If everyone will please note, the staff has asked for us to continue C4. So if you'll mark through C4, we will not be going over that today. Having eliminated that one, are there any items in the consent that anyone would like pulled? Ms. Adams.
C12, please.
C12, Ms. Adams. Anyone else? McIntosh, Scipio, I'm just seeing Mr. Taylor. Anybody out there? Mr. Mundy, anybody? I don't see any.
I make a motion to approve the balance.
Mr. Taylor's made a motion to approve the ballots. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Adams. All in favor, we'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Adams?
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, those are approved. So consent items are approved with the exception of C12. If the city clerk will please read C12.
Item C12, consideration of items relating to CARES Act funds.
Ms. Adams, you wanted this one.
Yes, Chair Clark, I think it's important, again, whenever we have government funds that are being received, allocated or reallocated, I think it's important that Ms. Newman or Ms. Tony tell the public what we're doing with these funds that are on the agenda today.
Okay. Ms. Tony, I'll start with you. If you want to designate it someone else, you can.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and members of the City Council. I would like to recognize Marla Newman to update us on this particular item.
Thank you. Ms. Newman, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Vice Chair Mayor Pro Tem Adams, members of the committee. Again, Marla Newman, Community Development Director. We are coming to you to discuss, again, our request to recapture and reallocate certain CARES Act funds. One of the things I'd like to mention as a point of context, when we received these funds from the federal government in 2020, at that time, we didn't know what we were facing. And so same can be said for a number of our organizations when they made requests to be able to respond to the pandemic. And so we tried to meet the needs as they were trying to foresee them at the time. As we have moved along through the pandemic now, we're almost 2 years in, we are finding that some of the needs that some agencies were anticipating did not materialize quite as they had expected. And because of that, then we have come in and looked at how we might move funds around from one agency to another for different uses, but still in compliance with the federal regulations that can still help to meet the needs that are continuing with the pandemic. And so in front of you is another one of these examples where we're looking to reallocate dollars that had been originally granted to United Way of Forsyth County, both for rapid rehousing, temporary financial assistance, as well as homeless prevention, temporary financial assistance. This particular pot of funds in Exhibit A are ESG funds that the state of North Carolina provided to the city. And these are federal funds, but the state receives an allocation, and then we as a local community get a share of the state allocation that HUD provides. So you'll see that total between those two types of use.
Ms. Newman.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we have Exhibit A and Exhibit B shown as you speak to them, please? Exhibit A.
Okay, sure. Is the city clerk able to show that, or do I need to share my screen?
Just hold tight. Let's see what we can do there.
Yes, sir.
Exhibit A and B. Yeah, there you go. You got it on the right thing.
Thank you.
There we go.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm in the top box where it has source of funds and the two types of funds. And you'll see, again, this is North Carolina ESGCV, so money that HUD sent to the state and the state allocated to the city. Between those two types of funds, you had a total of $522,766. So what we were looking to reallocate was a total of $272,766, still leaving monies in both of those categories for United Way to program. And then below in the second table, you'll see use of funds and how the funds have been divided amongst a variety of organizations for different uses. Again, all consistent with the HUD regulations, but they can still be used to support some of the ongoing needs for which the CARES Act funds were provided to the city. And the total you'll see here again is $272,766. So again, a breakdown of where the funds come from that we're reallocating and then where they're going.
Okay.
And then we have Exhibit B, if we can pull that one up. Now, these are funds that the city received directly from HUD. Again, rapid rehousing, temporary financial assistance, as well as homeless prevention, temporary assistance. In this instance, the United Way received $1,371,650. We are proposing that $519,930 be recaptured, still leaving $851,000 for the United Way to program. And then below, you'll see the use of funds again and how they are being divided amongst the various service providers in the community, including some dollars are allocated for behavioral health, mental street outreach, or medical street outreach, but a variety of shelter operations, furnishings, renovations, vouchers for folks who have to seek temporary shelter in motels, bus passes to enable people to be transported between shelters and potentially places of employment or where service providers are, also landlord incentives, and a variety of other uses. You'll also see a couple of line items where the city will also use some of the funds to help promote, in this instance, how we collect and report data. And so again, you have $519,000 that is being recaptured, and then we will allocate the $519,000 amongst a variety of entities.
Thank you very much. Those exhibits were very helpful.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
That's for information only. Any questions or comments on it? Thank you, Ms. Adams. Good. Oh, wait, excuse me. We need to vote on it. Mr. McIntosh has his hand up.
I had a question about the landlord incentives and how that's structured.
So we have challenges at times finding landlords who are willing to take some of our clients. And so some of the incentives are designed so that if there are some extraordinary costs that the landlords believe that they may have to cover, we provide a certain dollar amount to help offset some of those extraordinary costs that they may find themselves faced with. And so some are in the form of like an advanced deposit, and then others are our agreement to cover some costs if they are incurred on the back end.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Ms.
Yes, sir.
Scipio, did you have your hand up? Okay, Mr. Mundy? Jeff, you're muted.
It's Kevin.
Kevin, excuse me. Kevin, you have disappeared off my screen. If you're still there, you have the floor.
I can see him, but I can't hear him.
If we can't see you or hear you, and I don't know what to do other than if you could get back, yell at me, we'll get you there. With that, no other questions. Ms. Adams, would you like to make a motion on this?
Yes, I make a motion that we approve item C12.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve C12. I will now poll the council members, the committee members. Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor. Mr. Taylor. I can't hear or see him either. They're dropping like flies. Mr. Clark votes yes, so that is approved. Mr. Taylor, if you come back on, I'll allow you to record a vote on that one.
Yes.
Yeah, I hear a yes. Thank you. That is all for the consent agenda. Before we go to the general agenda, item G1 is related to the Waiver fire. I have asked staff to give an update on kind of where we are so we can all be on the same page. Mr. Rowell, I don't know who's going to present, but I'll let you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor Joins, Mayor Pro Tempore Adams, members of the City Council. In terms of the update, as far as any update on the fire investigation itself, the fire department will be holding a press conference on Wednesday at 11 o'clock. But in the meantime, I'll recognize Assistant City Manager Patrice Tony to provide a quick update on that.
Okay, Ms. Tony, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman Clark, thank you again and good evening. As Ben did state, the fire chief will give an additional update. There was a press conference last Wednesday. There'll be another press conference this Wednesday to give an update and timeline of the fire. At this point, we're really in recovery phase. The fire is out. There were no injuries or fatalities during this event. The area has been secured. Initially, it was secured by Winston-Salem Police Department. Now that has been turned over to the company, and they're actually hiring our police officers off duty to continue to secure the perimeter of where the fire event occurred. And so here we are in this kind of recovery phase. Oh, I do want to point out too, there was questions about water contamination. There was a water advisory that has since been lifted by the EPA. And so right now, I mean, I think the recommendation is still to stay out of these streams and ponds, but there was never any harm to the drinking water. And so for all practical purposes, that it's safe at this time, and that advisory has been lifted.
Councilmember Clark, in addition to that update, just wanted to share too, as part of the effort that the city did make available the Winston-Salem Fairgrounds Education Building as an emergency shelter. It opened late on January 31st and closed at 8 a.m. on February 4th. Our final number, there were 31 residents who checked in over that period of time. At most, 6 people stayed overnight. The American Red Cross did provide volunteers to support those who stayed, who utilized the shelter, providing 3 meals a day. There were cots, also available, blankets and water for those who were utilizing the shelter. In addition to that, Winston Weaver Fertilizer did provide $100,000 to 2 organizations, $50,000 to Love Out Loud, and then $25,000 to Second Harvest Food Bank. The remaining $25,000 they're going to pledge for future uses as needs arise. So $50,000 to Love Out Loud, $25,000 to Second Harvest Food Bank. The numbers we have from Love Out Loud, they've received 250 requests at this point via email or phone. And then the funds for Second Harvest Food Bank, they've utilized those funds to replenish their food stores and the resources that they made available during the evacuation period.
Okay, thank you very much. Any question from any members on kind of the preliminary information there? If not, we will get on to G1. Okay, if the clerk please read G1.
Item G1, consideration of items relating to authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement with a nonprofit to disperse the funding approved for residents within the 1 mile radius who were impacted by the Winston Weaver Fertilized plant fire.
Ms. Tony's got your name. I'm tempted to let Ms. Adams speak first, but since your name's on here, if anything you want to add, then we'll go to Ms. Adams.
Okay, will do. Well, at the request of Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and in response, she is a resident and the councilwoman of the North Ward. And so at her request, we are, this resolution, an item earmarks $1 million to assist residents within the 1 mile radius of the Winston Weaver fire. This resolution also authorized the city manager to enter into a contract with the nonprofit organization to actually disperse these resources on an as-needed basis. Right now, we're hearing a lot of the requests are for hotel reimbursement as well as lost wages. And there may be some others. We heard from Love Out Loud a little bit about some expanded uses that will request that they have been receiving, but these are the main two so far. So the amendment would appropriate the $1 million in general fund balance with the expenditure to the actual community agency. By the end of this fiscal year, any unused resources would go back to the general fund. So that's where we are at the time. I think looking at the numbers, I've gotten questions about, this $1 million amount. If we only took less than a third of the population in that 1 mile radius, well, what we know for sure, there are 6,500 residents that were impacted in that 1 mile radius. Less than a third would be 2,000 residents. If each of them had $500 in reimbursement potentially for hotel expenses, we're already at 1.5 million. So the 1 million seems reasonable just based on the population and the unknowns and uncertainties about what the need is and who needs to be reimbursed. And so that's why we came up with the $1 million amount. At this time, you heard the update from Ben on the resources that Weaver distributed to Love Out Loud and Second Harvest Food Bank. Love Out Loud is actually giving it directly for reimbursements for hotel related expenses and food. And so that 50,000, I'm certain will get eaten up really quick, but they also received additional private funding to support their funds. And so we need to be clear about how much money of the 50,000 is remaining for assistance. And so I'll stop there, and Mayor Pro Tem Adams, if you'd like to chime in.
Okay, Ms. Adams, you're next. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair Clark, members of the council, Mayor Joines, and staff. As we all know, for the past couple of weeks or so, we had an emergency situation in our city. Luckily, there was, as Ms. Tony said, no harm, no deaths, no fatalities. But there were other harms that, came out of this. With people who live paycheck to paycheck and some less than that. It is a qualified census tracts. It's the marginalized community of mostly Black and brown people that this was a heavy burden, an unexpected burden. Much like COVID, like I said, all of us have been traumatized by COVID, but now to have been traumatized by a major fire event that could have possibly wiped out most of this side of town. I think it's incumbent upon government to help its citizens in a time of crisis. I believe, just like all of us that have insurance policies for cars and homes and medical and whatever else, you don't really need it. You don't need it until you need it. You pay. And I feel like that our citizens pay taxes every day. And I know they get water and public safety and streets and sidewalks and other amenities. But I also believe that they believe that we should also step up when there's a time of tragic need that was unforeseen. As Ms. Tony said, right now, or what you'll see when this is to be discussed, we don't have a plan or process as to how we can help the businesses. I'm looking to the mayor's level of experience and expertise on this and others, and the city attorney, you'll hear something from her as well, as to how do we navigate these waters that we've never been in before. But one thing is that I'm sure of is that we will learn from this experience. We will use it as a benchmark, right, wrong, and different, as to how we respond in time of crisis, emergency crisis in our community. It could be a train that derails. We got a lot of trains that run through that could derail with chemicals or come off the track. We could have where a gas explosion happens in a neighborhood. But I think right now, because we have emergency responsiveness plans, but this will be hopefully another matrix or tool in our toolbox that we can use if we have to, that we will plan and go as we go forward. So Chair Clark, Mayor, members of the council, the people have spoken, but they didn't have to speak. I live over here. That they look for the city to help them because they need help. And if it comes to be, whereas we set up another fund and ask people to contribute from the city, businesses and others, that's not saying we can't do that either. But I'm hoping that we do this. We can do the residents' responsiveness, but at present we can't do the business because we have to figure that out. But with that, Chair Clark, I'm done, and Ms. Tony
Okay.
can do the presentation.
Oh, okay. So we have a presentation? No, okay. We do have some people that want to speak. Mr. Larson, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mayor Pro Tem, fellow council members. This needs to move quickly. The people out there are in need. This is not an act of God. It's an act of man. We're not paying the money to the actual fertilizer company that caused this problem. We're paying it to those that have been adversely impacted by something out of their control. I do support this. There are a couple matters that I would like to see clarified, though. I hope that before it comes to full council on Monday, that we'll know actually where the money's going. If we're going to work through Love Out Loud, who's already distributing money, it would be nice to know. I mean, they'd be front in line, hopefully, to spend their money first, and city money come in behind that. Try to get that done. Certainly a time limit. I think right now we're talking about the end of the fiscal year. I would say that would be acceptable, 90 days to spend it out, whatever criteria is being used. I think the cost, obviously loss of wages, loss of damage to property, for example, cleanup that may be involved after the fire, dealing with ash residue, things like that, that food, accommodations, those kinds of things need to be outlined as who would be eligible for this funding, a little more clarity as the categories that would be eligible. I'd like to see a little more clarity on that, perhaps as we go along. But I do think we need to move forward on this fairly quickly and have it in front of council next Monday.
And Chair Clark,
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Larson, if I may. Some of you have already heard me say that anytime you have a hazardous situation, whether it's in a business or your home, you have to do cleanup. And there's residue and things that adhere to surfaces that you can't see, you can't smell. And that's part of what I would like to hope that one of the categories would be, and I've talked to staff, we got to do some hazmat cleanup, because I've had residents and people to tell me that they don't feel safe in their houses right now because they don't know, nobody's come in to tell them how much residue is on the walls, the soot, the plume, none of that in their yards, their gardens, their animals, their pets. So like you said, we'll have different categories that we can legally participate in. But I do know that hazmat cleanup, mental health, other things, there's a lot of moving parts to this. You got the children that go to North Hill that live in the impacted area. You got people that work in the impacted area that were in the area when it was going on and didn't leave at the time because they didn't know. And then they were told not to come back. so it's just a lot of moving parts right now. Thank you so much, Councilman.
Okay, we have a number of people who like to speak. I'm just going down the list here. Mr. McIntosh.
Yeah, I want to first amplify what Mayor Pro Tem Adams said about this being an unexpected burden. And it's an unexpected burden on the people who can least afford it. People living paycheck to paycheck don't have an extra couple $100 to go stay in a hotel motel. I feel like this came because of no action by those people that were harmed by it. And it also came without any fault to the city of Winston-Salem. I feel like we have done an exceptional job. Our staff has done just an amazing job. And the problem occurs because of legislation or regulations that exist outside of our control. I would like us to vigorously work with Raleigh to see if we can't get to get some of this $1 million back up to whatever we spend. I know moving forward, there are ways for us to deal with not allowing this to happen in the future. We can put zoning regulations around where these things can be, but I have to imagine that this is not the only place in Winston-Salem that there are dangerous chemicals stored that we by law cannot regulate. We can't go search and put our own standards on them because that's controlled at a higher level in Raleigh. I'm hearing the right noises being said by our delegation down in Raleigh. I think this is the time for them to press to make changes, but the time to make changes really was a couple of years ago when the toxic materials place in Apex blew up. That should have been a warning siren to everybody that there are further problems out there. I do also think that it'd be great to find a way to help some businesses with relief. Triad Seafood Market right there on, I think it's on Indiana, that I go to fairly often. I mean, I can't imagine how much inventory they lost. They had to walk away from, just a bunch of product. So if we can find any way to help them out. I would like to make sure that how this money goes out is very carefully controlled. I think we need to put very strict definitions around the types of circumstances that we can respond to, because this will be a precedent. And we need to be fairly narrow about what circumstances we react and we act like this. What circumstances will we be the financial aid for if no other relief can be sought from the state or from the federal government. So I want us to be really careful about that.
Thank you. Ms. Scipio, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, for spearheading this initiative. I agree with all the comments that everyone else has made, but I like for us to think in terms of actually having an emergency relief fund that we have standing in our budget for these kinds of situations so that we could be more reactive more immediately for these kinds of special disasters. It may not be, this is one we sort of were blessed to escape catastrophe. But there are other emergencies that may come about, whether it's tornadoes or hurricanes, and we're not acting proactive. I would like for us to consider establishing an ongoing fund so that we always have something that we can immediately respond to when these disasters do occur. And I'm very happy we're talking about supporting the various small businesses that were impacted. And we've heard about the diaper bank, but there are quite a few small businesses in that area that had to shut down, and some of them I frequent. So I'm very much in favor of looking at the businesses as well as the residents. Thank you.
Ms. Burke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and colleagues on the council. I just want to say I agree and I'm in total support of everything that has been said. This is an emergency situation and we need to treat it as such. This is the worst fire that this city has ever seen, and it is in a marginalized community and it falls within the qualified census tracts. So I believe that we need to step up, as Mayor Pro Tem said, and we need to help our citizens right now because this is a crisis and they need us. So I thank Mayor Pro Tem for leading this, and I support it 100%. Thank you.
I have some comments, but I'm waiting to say those are all the hands I had up. Let me offer some comments and we can see where we want to go forward. My concern with this, and I certainly recognize the severity of the fire, is that everyone in this city is treated fairly. This could be a tremendous precedent-setting item. For example, most of the people who went with who did not work for 3 or 4 days do not live in this area. There are probably over 1,000 people that worked in those businesses, particularly down, I guess that's North Point Boulevard, down that way, Cherry Street, down in there, that were closed. I know of one in particular. The big cardboard making plant may have hundreds of employees. I don't know. But I would expect a policy that would reimburse anyone who is affected by this, regardless of where they live, would be reimbursed. But we have to be very careful if that is our policy, because if this policy had been in place in March of 2020, we would have had tens of thousands of people who lost their jobs when COVID hit. So we got to be very careful, but it's important that we treat everyone equally. I am concerned about the businesses that were affected. And if we're going to help one business, we have to help them all. We've got to have a policy in place. Again, if a tornado hits next month and takes out some businesses, what is our policy there? Do we cover lost wages on any event? I just think we need to be very careful on who we cover and how we cover it. And I want to say this as politely as I can, but unless there is a comprehensive policy that this council votes on Monday night, we will not approve money. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Adams, thank you for your leadership on this issue. Certainly we saw citizens that were impacted on that. The businesses are a big concern of mine, the small businesses, particularly all of them, but the small businesses who don't have business interruption insurance, particularly. I know there's a number of hairstylists and barbershops in there that I'm aware of that lost business for 3.5 days. So we'll need to work on that piece. I'm assuming, and this is a question to staff, Ms. Tony, that you and others will be putting together kind of a set of policies on how and criteria that will be used, and that will come back to us to look at before we start paying out monies.
Good evening, Mayor. Yes, that would be the plan. If it passed through finance, we will start developing a plan, and we can have that available for you at the council meeting, along with the intended nonprofit that would administer the funding and the criteria around which people could apply for the funding and a maximum amount per person.
Thank you.
Mr. Mundy, you had your hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hang on, Mr. Mundy.
Thank you, Chair Clark. I hope everyone can hear me now.
We can hear you and see you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Just for clarification, I did not hear reimbursement for lost wages. Did I miss that? I thought this was reimbursement for expenses incurred for hotel, for food, house repair, cleaning, whatever mitigation might have to be done. I did not hear lost wages.
Mr. Adams, do you want to comment on that?
I think, Councilman Monday, again, we're going to operate basically like we operated for ERAP, ESG, COVID money, CARES money, Arpa money. There are certain requirements and criteria that we've already been exercising the past couple of years. We don't have to recreate the wheel. We already got a wheel that we can go and take a spoke out and put something else in. But as you were saying, we're looking at expenses that, like the hotels, meals, daycare, because if the daycare was shut down in the neighborhood and my child couldn't go there, I might have had to take the child somewhere else in order for me to go to work. We're looking at mental health services if that's a component, because, and physical health. Atrium and Novant and them will be there on Wednesday night. Their representatives, public health, mental health, all of those. Long-term monitoring available through these resources, not the city, of how we now drive a stake in the ground as to the healthcare or the health position of the people that live in that impacted area, so that 5 years from now, 3 years from now, if we see the children in North Hills all have come down with asthma or some type of respiratory illness, we will immediately know that we can track it down to basically what happened then. The city is not totally liable for everything. It's you all business minded. There's a company, there's another entity involved. And businesses, like, they have liabilities. Councilmember Clark said they have insurance. But wages may not be it. It may be loss of revenue to the businesses, let's say. It may be, again, the money coming out for rent that you don't have. As Councilmember Scipio said, in the diaper bank people called me today. It's about other resources that they had to go get because they couldn't go back home, and they had to spend money at a store. So we will be looking for the same criteria of compliance. But as Councilmember Larson said, I don't think we want to be in the business whereas we are very strict on our citizens. I personally don't think it's a good look. I know we are government and we have to operate at a certain level, but there's also a level of humanity that we, as responsible elected officials, have to respond to the citizens that we represent. So I am quite confident with staff, Councilmember Clark, of coming back. They're very smart. They've been doing this now for almost 3 years or more, that they will come back with something that we can all look at. And if we need, and if you have questions or suggestions, you can reach out to them as to how you want to see this, this document crafted. And I don't think, to Councilmember Clark's credit, I don't think we are going to make this whereas, like you said, if a tornado comes through or a snowstorm comes through, we're going to have to figure out how we can do this and do it in a way that it doesn't impact the responsibilities of the judiciary part of the city. As a matter of fact, Attorney Carmen, are you on here? I don't see you.
I'm here.
There she is.
Could you explain briefly, Chairman Clark, if she could have the privilege of explaining the difference of why we can do residence versus business and what would have to happen if we do business?
Attorney Carmen, you have the floor, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Clark. I'll be happy to explain. Essentially, under General Statute 160A 456, which is now 160D 1311, which is a community development statute, it allows you to help low and moderate income persons, and it relates to employment in different categories. Unfortunately, the categories that are available under that particular statute do not extend broadly to businesses, small businesses, and it's very limited in terms of authority to give funds to small businesses. So that is the concern right now, just trying to figure out how to assist small businesses that were impacted by the fire within the constraints of the statute. But I think as to low and moderate income residents in the area or outside the area that may have worked in a business that's located in the area in terms of lost wages, again, as long as they're low and moderate income and fit that definition, then I think there's no problem. But it's just questionable as to businesses, but we're working on it.
I feel sure you are. Ms. Scipio, you had your hand up.
Just one moment.
Oh, excuse me, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Clark. Just to follow up, the reason I asked that question is I do agree with everything Mayor Pro Tem Adams was saying. When I heard low wages and compensating people who do not live in that area, that gave me reason for pause. So I'm hearing that that's not the case. Is that right? We would not be paying lost wages for anyone who doesn't live in the radius of the accident.
Work.
There is the possibility, as long as they're low to moderate income, if they fit that category, if council wants to provide assistance to them because they worked in a business that had to close down during that time period, that is a possibility, but they still have to be city residents.
Okay, that clears things up. Thank you. And I would like to know that Atrium and Novant would come to the table with some assistance in the way of mental health without billing the city back, without billing these individuals, but also help out in a charitable way, given that they both have charitable wings to their organizations.
Okay, I don't see any. Oh, Ms. Scipio, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes,
Sorry to watch all y'all at once.
my question is, and Attorney Carmen, you might be able to respond to this, but is there an opportunity that the city could get reimbursed for its support of these residents from the company based on their liability insurance or whatever? Could they in actuality reimburse us for whatever funds we give to our residents in support of their actions?
That is certainly an avenue that I am pursuing on behalf of the city, and I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you.
Okay, I do not see any more hands up. Ms. Adams, would you like to make a motion?
I would move that we approve item G1.
G1. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. I will go down the roll call. Ms. Adams. Ms. Adams.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, yeah, you may have said yes, I didn't hear you. Mr. McIntosh.
Aye.
Mr. Taylor.
Yes, I'd like to make a comment at the end, sir.
Okay, and I'm going to abstain till I see the guidelines. Mr. Taylor, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Tony, just a quick comment. When you bring the information on Monday regarding the nonprofit we select, just make sure you look into how much of the funding would go towards administrative costs. And the reason why that's important, we want to make sure as much of the money as possible is getting to the folks in our community who need it the most.
Good point. Okay, folks, we still have a few more items here. Let me see my times. I'm okay here. We will now go to G2. If the city clerk will please read it.
Item G2, consideration of items relating to the Choice Neighborhood Initiative.
Ms. Newman, if you could present this, please.
Yes, sir. Again, good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Vice Chair, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, and members of the committee and the council, and Mayor Joines. As we know, Winston-Salem and the Housing Authority of Winston-Salem were awarded a $30 million Choice Neighborhoods Implementation Grant by HUD in April of 2020. As part of our commitment prior to the application, and that went along with the application, the city committed to providing a combination of funding to support the build out of the revitalization and transformation of Cleveland Avenue homes. That commitment that we made was $3 million in community development block grant dollars, as well as $3 million in general obligation bond funds over the 6-year period of the grant. So the grant period runs from 2020 through the end of 2026. We had previously taken action to obligate those general obligation bonds, but we had not taken the formal action to obligate our community development block grant funds because we get those allocations on an annual basis. And we had not yet received the initial allocation in 2020 that would help to fund our 6-year commitment. We have now received both that 2020 and 2021 allocation. And although we have not received the one for 2022 yet, we have been able to make up that difference utilizing program income from community development block grant funds so that we can start to make our payments toward the development of the area and enable phase 1 to start construction late spring, first of the summer. And so what you have before you are the breakdown of the amounts of funding that we are looking to provide. You also will see in the CARF where we have a unit count based on income of the individuals who would be housed in the phase 1 development that will take place at the former Brown Elementary School site. That first phase consists of 81 units, but you'll see that the income range is from persons who are below 30% AMI. Those are 37 units that will receive project-based vouchers through HAWS. You'll see another group whose income ranges between 31 and 60% AMI. Those units will be covered by low-income housing tax credits. And then the last set of units, the 30 units, will be eligible for people with incomes up to 120% of area median income, or other words, our market rate units, for a total of 81. And of course, the CARF outlines some of the amenities for the units and the property in general. Again, this is phase 1 of 5 phases for the redevelopment of Cleveland Avenue homes. And you'll see that the projected cost is $29,239,970. And we're looking to commit both the $1,500,000 in CDBG funds and $1,844,440 in general obligation bond funds. And these are our 2018 housing bond funds. And I can pause there at the moment and answer any questions you may have.
Ms. Newman, this is more of a broader question. I believe this is a 3-phase project, if I remember correctly.
5.
5 phase.
Yes,
Grown
sir.
5 more. Since we originally approved this, and this is a very, I think, game-changing program, we've had a lot of inflation in the construction area. How does this 29 million compare with what we were expecting for phase 1?
It's impacted it some. We started off as recently as about 6 to 8 weeks ago, being fully funded. We've had a slight shift in some of the costs that we're trying to lock down before they get any higher and actually get the contractor with a firm commitment on the pricing. But yes, overall, the project is looking at increasing cost, and that means that we're having to investigate other sources of funding to help close that gap. We've also been in conversation with HUD to see if there are any special provisions that HUD can make to help close the gap in terms of some additional funding. And so we're also looking at a variety of other strategies. But right now, yes, we, like many other developments happening right now, are looking at escalating costs. But we continue to push forward.
Yeah, I don't want to get down here and turn out this is a 3.5 phase project instead of a 5, because we run out of money at some point. It sounds like we're trying to work it as best we can, understanding that some of these questions you can't answer right now. Anyway, I got a number of questions, Mr. Mayor, and then I'll get to Ms. Scipio. Mr. Mayor.
No question. Just wanted to congratulate our staff, Ms. Newman, for, she mentioned program income, and we shouldn't really take that lightly, because we're at one time one of the few community development block grant agencies that really did much of our programming years ago, so that we do get program income on a regular basis. So it makes her ability to go find some money to close those gaps a little more doable. So I just want to congratulate you for the way we structured these programs.
Ms. Scipio, you're next.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Newman, for this report. Just a point of clarification, the total cost from this CARF shows that phase 1 is $27 million, and we got a grant for $30 million. So what is the now projected cost for the total choice program?
So as you mentioned, clarification, the choice grant was not intended to cover the entire redevelopment of Cleveland Avenue homes. It is considered more like a catalyst. It is only a part of the money that's necessary. The earlier estimated build out for the redevelopment process was somewhere around $110 million. So we're above that now because of the increased cost due to COVID. But the 30 million was not the end all and be all of the redevelopment. That was just a portion of it. You have low income housing tax credits, you have our dollars. So those costs are spread throughout the project. This project is one of the few, it might be the first in the state, if I recall, that has a forward commitment of tax credits throughout the life of the project. We have 5 more years of tax credits that the State Housing Finance Agency has agreed to allocate to this project. So the 30 million, it only represents a portion of the total.
It's going to be raising the rest of that money, just so that everybody has the same understanding.
Yes, ma'am. That is the responsibility of the developer, McCormick, Bear and Salazar.
Okay.
And they ask us to work with them and open some doors and make some introductions, either us and or Hawes, but that responsibility is on the developer.
And so this city go bonds and the CDBG is going to be our final commitment to this project? Because that's all we were obligated to give to this?
That is the obligation that council has made to date. Certainly, if it's council's desire to make additional investments, you know, you do actually have that ability to do so. This just represents a portion of the initial commitment that was made as part of the application for the grant in 2019.
So just to be clear, we have not made any other commitments to this project other than this 3 million, or is this a continuing commitment?
No, this is the commitment. Well, it's a total of 3 million CDBG, 3 million go bonds. So for a total of $6 million over the life of the project.
Oh, that's clear. Thank you so much.
Ms. Newman, it might be helpful if you could send out, Ms. Scipio's brought up the point. For that, the total project of 110 million, there was a simple chart. X amount is tax credits that are sold, X amount is our money, X amount is the 30 million, and then we're going to borrow some because these are income producing, et cetera. I have seen that on a quick chart. If you could find that somewhere and send it back out. And I would just reiterate the point. I was at the TAC meeting, that's our Transportation Advisory Committee, the other day. And there was a bid that came in, and the low bid was 70% above the estimate that had been done, and that was a current estimate. So I'm glad to hear that on at least phase 1, we seem to be close to budget, but I'm just hoping Washington's going to recognize inflation and help us out a little bit. Anyway, we need a motion to approve. This is committing the CBBG and the general obligation funds for phase 1. If I could get a motion on this. Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Mr. Clark? Yes, that is approved. G2. We will now go to G3. If the city clerk will please read this.
Item G3, resolution authorizing the use of the city's allocation of coronavirus local fiscal recovery funds for the transformational grant phase for nonprofit organizations.
Okay, Mr. Tesh, I've got your name beside this one. Would you like to begin?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of the committee and council. This is an action item we're bringing before you, very similar to the information item you saw last month. I'm going to turn this over to Meredith Martin, who's our Deputy Budget and Performance Management Director, to give a quick presentation, and then we'll take any questions you have. Meredith.
Ms. Martin, are you out there somewhere?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, Mayor Joines, Mayor Pro Tem Adams, Chair Clark, and members of the committee and council. Just have a brief presentation. I know we're kind of limited on time here regarding the transformational phase of the Arpa funds. So for this phase, the application process to apply the minimum eligibility, you need to be a nonprofit 501c3 status, have that current, and be in business at least 1 year prior to the request for proposals being released. The application will be available via Neighborly platform, which other city departments use for grantee agency application processes. The review process for the application will also somewhat be phased in that the internal ARPA task force will check on the minimum eligibility requirements as well as all the required attachments being there for the application to be scored. An internal staff team will then do the core review of the applications using the scoring matrix that you will hopefully adopt or approve this next week to score the applications, and all the applications will then be compiled based on their scores into tiers for mayor and city council review and approval. So speaking of the scoring matrix, nothing has changed from the presentation last month to the presentation tonight. You can see the weights of the scores and the different categories, and I believe Exhibit B in your agenda has a more detailed scoring matrix telling you specifically what needs to be done to score a certain amount of points on each question. Finally, just to provide the next steps for this process, pending your approval this month, we would like to release the request for proposals and open that up next month. The application process would stay open 1 month, and so it will close in April, where reviews would then immediately take place. Depending on the number of applications received, some of our peer jurisdictions have received 200 to 300 applications. We would hopefully like to bring that back in May, but like I said, depending on the number of applications and proposals received, that may take a bit longer. I know that was quick, but that's my presentation. Any questions? I'll gladly try to answer.
Ms. Martin, what's the amount of money in the bucket for this?
So according to the framework, the current obligation was for the social and economic assistance, which on the framework was right above $10 million.
How much again? 10?
10 million, yes, sir.
10 million, okay. All right. Again, this was presented last month. Information is presented now as a resolution. Do we have any questions or comments? I don't. Oh, Mr. Larson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One quick question about strategic priorities. The document that is included in this particular period, or this particular document that we're looking at tonight, does this conform entirely with the strategic plan that the city prepared? Because it seems to be tier 1, for example, and this document gives a great deal of credit to the local travel and tourism industry, whereas our planning document, I believe it's in tier 2, for example. Is this the document that's going to be handed out, this priorities, strategic priority listing? Is this what the potential applicants are going to see and work against?
They will be able to see that, but the application will actually be based more on the scoring matrix, which is Exhibit B. Exhibit C is the priorities, and I believe one of the questions within the matrix is how your proposal will align with the priority, with your strategic priorities, and then that's just to give you kind of as a supplement document what our strategic priorities include.
So are they going to see the whole strategic plan, or are they going to see this summary statement?
Pending your approval, I think in 2 items of the strategic plan, they will also have access to the strategic plan.
The full strategic plan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then the evaluation will be based on the strategic plan or on the document that's included in this particular presentation?
It will be on the scoring matrix. Just one section of the application is just trying to associate where the proposal and the concept of the program you're proposing fits within the strategic plan. Because it's a transformational item, we're wanting to move the needle on those big issues within our community that have been labeled by you all through the strategic plan.
I understand that. I'm just trying to understand what strategic plan we're looking at.
Councilmember Larson, let me cut in there. I think in what we provided there, where you're hitting on travel and tourism, it hits twice. Once in tier 1, focus on job creation and workforce development, specifically noting that small businesses and invigorating the local and travel tourism economy was noted at the strategic planning workshop. And then also tier 2 specifically calls out a COVID reopening plan. So when you're talking about the travel and tourism industry, it's actually noted in 2 different sections specifically. They would need to make note of the organization would need to make note of what it's doing, what its program is doing, and the alignment that it has to either just generally reopening because of COVID, or more specifically, whether they're focusing on job creation and workforce development in that area. So they could fit into either tier 1 or tier 2 based on what program they've scoped.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you.
Ms. Scipio.
Yes, just for clarity, under the exhibit, exhibit A, the ARPA framework that details the expenses. We've already expended the 3 million that's here for recovery grants. Is that right?
That's the process here. I pull up Exhibit A just so everyone can see. We're in the midst of that. That application process actually closes on Friday.
Yeah, so that's already accounted for here. That's why I was trying to understand where you got that 10 million you spoke to.
It's the social assistance right here, as well as the economic assistance.
Oh, down here in the bottom. Okay.
In the future phases, yes, ma'am.
Future, okay. All right. But none of this phase 1 programs, except for those 3 grants that are open, these others, we've already started them. Is that right? Oh,
yes, ma'am.
Okay,
yes,
I got
they've been approved previously by the mayor and city council. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Phase 1, you're currently getting applications and will come to us shortly with the results, so to speak.
Yes, sir.
And we're getting ready to do the same thing with this next tranche of money. And it's about a month behind the first group.
Yes, sir.
Give or take days. Any other questions on G3? Can I get a motion on this then?
I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion second on G3. I will now poll the committee members. Ms. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. McIntosh,
Aye.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. G3 is approved. We will now go to G4. And just for everyone's record, I have roughly 30 minutes and 3 items. G4 is information only. We will get more detailed budget as we move forward. Again, I think we'll get to different additional information in April. Then the committee looks at it in May, and we come back with a budget in June. So we'll try to attend roughly 10 minutes on each item. So G4, Mr. Tesh.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee and council. I have both this item and the next one, so I will try and move quickly. I'm going to share my screen here for the early budget forecast, which focuses mostly on the general fund. I hope that everyone can see that. Give me 1 second. I actually prefer to share the PDF rather than, I think it'll be easier for everyone to see. Can everyone see that?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so this is the early budget forecast for the fiscal year 23. We're going to start looking at projection for year end here for fiscal year 21-22. I'll draw your attention to the 2 columns on the left and the call out there that shows a projected addition to fund balance of nearly $12 million. We're going to talk about that, but what that essentially means is at the end of the year, adding $12 million to the general fund balance or savings account, more than what we normally add, but somewhat similar to last year. What's kind of driving that for 22 year end? Sales tax growth is very high compared to what we would see in normal years. So we're expecting to be nearly $6 million over our budget for sales tax growth just in the general fund. With the permits that are being issued and the construction field and industry where it's at, we're actually projecting to see $1 million in revenue in construction permits, higher than budgeted. Recycling is another one of those. This is not related to the new contract. This is simply that commodity markets are that much better. And one note there going in the opposite direction, gas tax. We actually have a lot of vacancy. We'll talk about this here on the other side of the slide. But because we don't have as many field operations crews operating, we won't be able to transfer as much money to the general fund to cover those operating expenses. On the expenditure side, what's driving this addition to fund balance potentially at year end? As we just talked about vacancy, we're at nearly 18% vacancy citywide. So we're expecting to see almost a $5 million mark below budget on the personnel side. Roughly $2.5 million below budget on supplies and services. If you don't have enough people to staff those positions, it kind of makes sense that they're not using the supplies and contracts that they would regularly use. And on the vehicle acquisition side, I believe because of the pandemic, we're seeing some slower delivery times on vehicles and also need to get some of our equipment requests purchases out the door. I will note here the snowfall forecast. This is an early budget forecast for what we're going to look like at year end. It was a couple of weeks ago, they told us we were going to get a foot of snow and we only got 2 inches. So saying that we're going to add 12 million to fund balance is an early projection. The other note there, we've only received to date in this presentation 4 of the 12 months of sales tax at this point. So we will continue to update you, particularly at trial balance budget in April. But for year end, this is where we're looking. So really quickly on the sales tax side, if I'll draw your attention to where I'm circling, if you can see my pointer, I'm not sure if you can, but the 3 columns that are in light blue for July, August, and September on sales tax show you growth rates of greater than 10% in sales tax compared to the prior year. That is not something that we've seen sustained for a very long time. So we are being a little careful about sales tax growth. Leading into 23, what we're looking at is a potential gap, early gap of $7 million. Now that sounds pretty large based on talking about sales tax coming in that well, but we're going to look at the drivers both on the personnel side and the supplies and services side and revenues as well. So jumping right into it, a 3.8% average merit, as you see over there on the left, solid, strong, and top performers of 3, 3.5, and 4.5% respectively. That is more than we would normally do, but at this stage, we're looking at inflation, and because of inflation currently projecting that, the effect of that is you see more than $6 million on the general fund. We will continue to monitor that and see what our peers do, but that's what's currently in the base budget for the early forecast. Our public safety career ladder, potentially looking at opportunities for the firefighter and police officer positions to have a career ladder would have an impact of $2 million. Our 2% public safety supplemental pay adjustment that is effective every January, $1.7 million, so a continuation of that. A little over $1 million just in retirement contributions. We don't set those are set by the state. The city manager has proposed effective July of 2022, a 2% additional sworn law enforcement officer market adjustment. So that would be for sworn police officers only. And then additional position regrades that the city council actually approved last month had an effect of more than $800,000 on the base budget. As you see over to the left, those included many types of equipment operators, frontline supervisors, engineering positions, 911 operators, and other difficult to fill positions. Last note on there, we're going to look at removing the flat rate pay plan to ensure that all city employees are paid the city's minimum wage. There are a few different position types that currently make less than $15 an hour based on specific seasonality, but we'll be removing that as part of the base budget. On the non-personnel side, we've talked about the recycling contract a couple of times. It's about $2.9 million in terms of a total increase. On the revenue side, we'll see how we're going to offset that. $1.2 million for general contract increases and unavoidable expenses, IS charge increases, new systems, contracts that have cost of living adjustments and inflation built into them. We are currently recommending an additional $1.1 million in vehicle replacement. We do have a lot of vehicle replacement and maintenance needs, so trying to catch up there. Sanitation tipping fees. This is an area where we saw some pretty significant increases during the pandemic. And had a little bit of a structural issue. So we're going to ensure that we have the correct amount of funds there based on what we're seeing currently. And then $600,000 for city building security. This includes metal detection services in City Hall and the Bryce H. Stewart building. It does not include additional security services at Lowry Street currently, but I do know that our property and facilities management department is looking at that. On the revenue side, so we kind of talked about sales tax already. We're going to show in the early forecast an $8.5 million growth in sales tax for the general fund. That includes 5% to year end and then a 3% growth rate for 2022-23. I don't have my crystal ball. I do know that we're probably going to see the Fed raise interest rates. Inflation is currently between 6 and 8%, depending on who you talk to and what metric you look at. So we're being a little conservative right now, and we'll continue to see what our peers do and what some of that economic forecast looks like from some other major players. Property taxes, no rate change. $2 million is just the base increase that we would get from about 1 3/4 change in the property tax base. These next two are recycling fee and recycling commodity revenues. You'll see that they net to that $2.9 million, which was the increased cost of the recycling contract. So we are projecting $900,000 in additional commodity revenue, and then have shown here $2 million, the additional increment to be covered by a potential fee imposed in 2022-23. As you see over on the left, that fee would be approximately $2.50 per month, or roughly $5 every other month on the water and sewer bill that's received by monthly. Just a note, that $2 million is roughly equivalent to 0.8 of a penny on the tax rate. So if we didn't want to charge the recycling fee, that's how much it would be of a hit to the tax rate. Again, construction permits higher than the previous year, but being a little bit conservative, and did want to note that our alcoholic beverage control revenues are also up nearly $500,000. So that is helping the general fund as well. I know that that's really fast. The property tax base, as we talked about, increasing at 1.75%. That's a general growth rate in a non-revaluation year for us. So we will work with the county tax department. If there is additional growth to be captured there, he will provide us, the tax director will provide us those estimates in the coming months. One quick note here, we are obviously have the city's ARPA funds that are running kind of parallel to this process. We intend to bring an item in March that would potentially use the lost revenue calculations to provide and restore some fund balances in our public assembly facilities management fund, which includes the downtown ballpark, the Benton, Bowman Gray Stadium, and the fairgrounds, as well as the parking fund and occupancy tax funds, which are those funds that were really hit hardest by the pandemic in terms of net revenue loss. We will also be bringing back, as you see each year, selected pro formas for enterprise funds to discuss if there are additional needs outside of the general fund. So things related to the stormwater management fund and whether fee increases are needed to keep it sustainable as well. But we will bring those back in April with trial balanced budget. A quick look at the budget calendar. What I will draw your attention to is that Monday, March 28th meeting, the capital projects workshop. Everything else on here is pretty normal in terms of the timing. But as you are all aware, we will be having a special meeting of the City Council to discuss capital projects, which will include the draft capital plan recommendations from staff, as well as discussions around opportunities for other capital funding needs throughout the community. Again, the rest of that calendar falls very much in line with what we would see on a normal annual calendar for budget. Any questions, comments, concerns? I know we're trying to run through these very quickly.
Mr. Tesh, I didn't realize it, but in February or January of 2023, a little bit less than a year from now, we will get new valuations on our personal property. You said 2022-23 was a revaluation year.
The current year was a reval year. 22 was. I can go back to that presentation. What I was saying is that 1.75% is a normal growth outside of a reval year, because this year is not a reval. 23 will not be a revaluation year for your property.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem. Okay. I believe you had met individually with the council members on this before as well. So we will stay tuned as you fine tune it as we move towards the budget season.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. You can keep going. You've got G5, which is a resolution, adopting the 2022-23 strategic plan. Go ahead.
So thank you again. As Councilmember Larson alluded to, the strategic plan is up for adoption. I am going to recognize Meredith Martin as well for this one. She has another very brief presentation on this. I would note again, there is nothing here that you haven't seen before. Previous information items covered this in prior meetings of committees, but I will turn it over to Ms. Martin.
Ms. Martin.
Good afternoon again. Brief presentation on the strategic plan. So just a little bit of information on the development of the strategic plan. There were several community engagement opportunities facilitated by the Novak Consulting Group. There were 4 different sessions that had specific stakeholders involved, as well as a full public input session that took place. As part of the development, other citizen information that was reviewed was the resident survey data. The resident survey was, the data was collected in January of 2021, And this provides resident perceptions on city programs and services. Following these two items, the City Council held a 2-day strategic planning workshop. From that workshop, 16 different priorities were developed, and they were placed into 3 different tiers. So here's, you can see briefly the 3 different tiers and the various priorities that were decided by City Council as focus areas for our community moving forward. So the alignment of the priorities to focus areas, 11 of the 16 priorities fall within economic vitality and diversity or livable neighborhood focus areas. And the first 2 tiers are all within those 2 focus area categories. So as an overview of the 3 different tiers, Tier 1 has 4 priorities that have key themes of job creation, pre-K, affordable housing, and economic development. Of these 4 priorities, there are 21 total action items within the strategic plan to help us try to move forward with these priorities and move the needle, so to speak. And on the right, you can see on the next couple slides, just some metric information that will be tracked as we move forward with the strategic plan. Tier 2, again, 4 priorities: poverty cessation, COVID reopening, community engagement, and supporting public art. Again, 21 action items for these 4 priorities. And finally, Tier 3, there are 8 priorities within this tier: community fundraising, environmental initiatives, digital divide, childcare needs, neighborhood aesthetics, transportation investments, organization efficiency, and law enforcement reform. This tier has at least 1 priority that touches every focus area for a total of, and there were a total of 40 action items within these 8 priorities. So as a summary and the next steps for the 2022 to 2025 strategic plan, again, 16 total priorities, 82 total action items. Staff will continue to look at the alignment of these priorities and action items for federal and local funding sources. And then we will provide a semi-annual report on the action item status to keep you all abreast of where we stand with our strategic plan. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions or comments? Ms. Scipio.
Ms. Meredith, in the actual document that was attached, are all of the action items listed, or are some of them somewhere else?
They should all be included within that document.
Okay, so if I look under each one, although they have different numbers, if I numbered them from 1 to whatever, I would get the total action items that we put there. Okay,
Yes,
is that right? Okay.
That's correct. They're numbered within the document just as a tracking mechanism for staff.
Yes. Okay. Is there an opportunity to consider other action items over the, this is what's this, 3-year document? How do we add action items to it?
If it's similar to the strategic plan, if we all follow the strategic planning process we did last time, at our midpoint, midway through, we reconvened and evaluated where we were within the strategic plan, if there were action items that needed to be included to ensure we continue progressing in the right direction.
Okay.
Ms. Scipio, any other questions there?
Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Larson.
Thank you. Just for clarity, Meredith, when will this document be reevaluated? When does council meet again? And to answer Councilmember Scipio's question about making additions or alterations to this document, when will council actually have a chance to delve into this document and revise?
Likely 2 years.
2 years from today, 2 years from the last election, 2 years from.
2 years from today. Typically, we've in the past always done it in the spring, early spring, late winter, reevaluating the strategic plan. So we could shoot for that time.
So you're talking about 2024?
Yes, sir.
23.
See, it's 22, 24.
Councilmember Wilson, let me jump in there and say that we are a little behind our normal adoption for this. The city manager will talk with council members about the correct and appropriate schedule for looking at this. It may be as quickly as doing it in the next 18 months instead of 2 years. That 2-year cycle would normally be from the time that we held those meetings, but that was last year. So we can work with the city manager and ensure that we're on the right time frame, that we're looking at the needs and changing them as appropriate.
Well, I think if I may, since we have several new council members who were not really actively participating in developing this particular document in those workshops. Is that not correct?
It's the current council.
Yes, sir. This all took place in March of 2021.
Okay. My bad.
The bottom line is we can review them whenever we want to, but if this is a strategic plan, usually it's not something that should change overnight.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, may I make a motion?
Hang on a minute, Ms. McIntosh had a comment, and then you make a motion. Hold tight. Mr. McIntosh. He says no. Okay, Miss
Adams.
Adams, would you please make a motion?
I know you got a lot going on. I move for approval of item G5.
Second.
We have a motion second. I'll poll the committee members. Ms. Adams?
Yeah.
Mr. McIntosh?
Aye.
Mr. Taylor?
Yay.
Chair votes yes. Last item, G6, and we should be finished on time. Mr. Rouse going to talk about Union Station.
Thank you, Chairman Clark. Good evening again. Mayor Joins, Mayor Pro Tempore Adams, members of the City Council. So staff felt like it was an appropriate time to come and provide you all an update on the redevelopment of Union Station. And just to recap, back in July 2014, the Mayor and Council approved the issuance of $18.3 million in limited obligation bonds for the redevelopment of Union Station. The city also had received some federal transportation money to help us with the acquisition of the building. The project was completed in September 2019, and Union Station was reopened. So just want to really kind of give you an update level by level. And so starting with the first level, which is on the track level, that is where we relocated our Department of Transportation operations. Did that, and they moved in 2020. That included DOT administration, technical assistance, and the traffic signal system operations. The cost of that upfit was a little over $733,000. And of that amount, about almost $203,000 of that was covered from Federal CARES Act dollars. So they are moved in and operating down there on the first level. The second level is the space that the city had pursued a lease agreement with Winston-Salem State for them to provide some of their programs in that space. In January of 2021, the Mayor and Council approved the final terms for the lease of the 8,000 square feet on that level at an annual rent of $80,000. As part of that, those final terms, the city agreed to contribute $450,000 towards the projected cost of the upfit of that space. The projected cost is $675,000. That was a revised number from previous estimates. As we've started the process of estimating the cost and the design, the costs were above what we had budgeted and had anticipated. And so that number was, we value engineered it down to $675,000. So the city's covering $450,000, and the university is going to contribute the remaining $225,000. And the university also would cover the cost of furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Just as a note, because there was some discussion, during the course of finalizing the lease agreement, there is no space on the third level included in the final lease agreement. The council did approve the final terms and maintained the square footage just on the second level. The actual rent will be due when we complete the upfit. And as far as an update on where we are with the upfit, university and city staff have reconvened to start finalizing the design for that space. Whereas initially the thought was to use the space for some of the academic services that would require office space to ensure privacy. That scope has now changed, and the plan is for there to be the print shop, the passport office, and what's called their sponsored programs. And that so it allows for a more open floor plan. So staff's working together with university officials to finalize that design. Once that's done, it would be looking to start the process of bidding out for construction. So at this point, we don't have a firm schedule, trying to still finalize that design, but we feel like now we can really move forward with the process. And then finally, the third level, which is on the street level, is the level where the renovation work was done to improve the public area, but then also to provide for space for the potential development of a restaurant. And just to recap where we are with that, in September of 2020, the mayor and council approved the minimum requirements for an RFP process for potential restaurants to lease that third level. And as one of those conditions was a commitment of the city to contribute $283,450 towards that upfit. And that would cover basically really preparing the space. So exhaust fan system, grease trap, electrical, plumbing, design and engineering costs. So anything above that to finish out the space, the intent was for that to be the responsibility of the tenant. So including furniture, fixtures, and equipment, glassware, silverware, those types of expenses. In July of last year, we retained Peterson Gordon Architects to do a kitchen alteration study just to see exactly what we think the cost would be. And at that time, the projected cost was actually looking more towards $525,000. So more than what we had originally committed towards. And so the assumption is that the tenant would potentially contribute towards that additional cost. But at this point, we're probably looking at altogether to do these upfits. And then if we wanted to provide a base level of equipment in that space, probably looking at more of a $750,000 cost to do that. And at this point, there are no funding sources identified to do that work. So we are kind of in a holding pattern there. We did conduct an RFP process in late 2020, received a response from one restaurant, Elite Eats by RE LLC. They, in their proposal, committed to providing a full service restaurant with breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What we are doing now is just looking back over that proposal. And I think that what we're proposing as staff for next steps in terms of this particular development of the third level is to look at the cost estimates again for the kitchen alteration to make sure that $525,000 number and the additional $200,000 in equipment costs. So that's still a good number, certainly in light of what's going on in the construction industry. And then continue our due diligence review of what Elite Eats submitted back in late 2020 to do, particularly looking more at the financial capacity of the company to be able to operate a restaurant. Do they have the capital to do, contribute towards their part of the upfit? Do they have the working capital? And then as part of that, potentially reach out and discuss the idea of providing some small business assistance as part of steps in terms of the third level. Also, just one thing on that third level, and the Winston-Salem Fairgrounds has now added Union Station as part of its portfolio of facilities that it now does event management. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I'd like to offer some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that I really have to have a lot of patience with to us to make it a restaurant kitchen I think it's unfair to ask any company to come in and buy equipment for that restaurant. In the original proposal, we were providing everything for the build out to the person who had applied before. I think we have to see it as our space, and we have to help people have a good restaurant there. So I'm really hopeful that we'll find the money to get this built out. As you'll also remember, we did have money left over from the build out of Union Station, and we diverted those funds to fix the roof at Bryce Stewart. So, and we've taken those funds to some other things. So I think it's incumbent on us to try to find the funds to really do a decent kitchen at Union Station, so that our side of town will have a full service restaurant, which we still don't have in the East Ward near downtown. So I thank Mr. Rao for continuing to investigate this and keep it alive. But I would like for us to have a little more enthusiasm and pay attention to really helping the East Ward, the historic part, look like the rest of this city in a more timely basis.
Thank you. Last one, Mr. McIntosh, then we'll adjourn.
Yeah, I would just like staff to follow up with council on when the previous offer that we were negotiating was made. How long ago was that? And what was the lease rate on that deal? The other is just more of a comment. $750,000 for a kitchen update does not surprise me all that much. In the business, it is not typical though for the landlord to provide FFE, furniture, fixtures, and equipment. That's very atypical. Landlords don't typically do that. But a $750,000 outfit, you've got to be a restaurant that's turning some tables and doing some business and has some economic, some business acumen to make that kind of a nut work. So I just hope whoever comes to us as the finalist is able to make that work at that kind of number. Thank you.
Okay, with that, folks, thank everybody. We're finished about a minute late. Public safety will start in 6:05.
Public safety will start around 6:10.
6:10 public safety. Thank you all very much. We are adjourned.